in a work environment, if two men are in a power struggle,
Yep.
they try and pick at the other person, right?
Yes.
And so the same thing applies to a woman. And
Yes.
so if someone pushes her buttons,
Uh-huh.
what they're what they're trying to do is see, is she going to be emotional? All
Yeah.
the kind of stereotypical
Yes. Is she
cliches,
gonna
right?
be
I-
hysterical?
Is she going to cry? Is she going
Yep.
to be irrational? Is she
Mm.
going to be emotional? And if she is any of those things, she
Mm.
loses.
Mm. Mm.
So she has to be thick-skinned, has to be tough, and
Mm-hmm.
has to be stoic, and
Mm-hmm.
not let anything get to her. And that might not be fair, but that
Mm.
is certainly the reality of what it takes to be successful in a kind of locker room corporate culture that is
Yep.
male dominated.
So today I'm so excited to have with me one of my old friends, John LeFevre. Hi, John.
Hello, Crystal. It's a pleasure to be back and to see you again.
I think the purpose of the podcast very much was inspired by all these women who were writing to me and they were asking me for advice. Like, how did you manage to survive and thrive in a white male investment banking dominated culture? And I found it so difficult, John, because, like, for me, the things that I did that made me successful are not necessarily things that I would recommend today, on
Yeah.
hindsight. Second thing is that I think, like, in terms of male female, I've never really looked at that as a primary lens. I mean, I know it sounds insane because a lot of people say, like, you can't not look at someone and see gender. Like, it's not that I don't see the gender, but like I've always felt like a male. Like, I've always felt very in tune with my masculine energies, if you will. And and I feel
Well,
and I've
that's your answer right there. That's one of the reasons why you were successful.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I really believe that we have this very binary way of looking at things, which is like male, female, whereas I think every single human is like a mix of these masculine and feminine energies, and we need both to be a great leader. We need to listen and we need to act. We need to focus on tasks, get shit done, and we need to be great at relationships as well. So, I mean, that's why I thought of you, because you wrote so many brilliant articles, for new investment bankers, for new interns on the job. You're great at explaining culture. Tell us a little bit about your OG foray into social media. You were such an early adopter.
Sure. When I first started, I loved the job. I loved everything about it. I loved the people. I loved the excitement of working on deals that
Mm,
made the Wall Street Journal.
hmm
Um, but from the very beginning, wherever I looked, I was not that impressed. I
mm,
thought the people took themselves too seriously.
hmm
I thought to a large extent the job was not that hard,
hmm
and rather cynically, I felt that people defined themselves as human beings by where they worked and what their business title was. So I was
Yes.
always really, really cynical on the industry, and I knew that I had no interest in being a career banker. So
hmm
with that in mind, I started collecting stories very early on. Personal stories, deal related stories,
Yes.
humorous stories.
Yes. Mm.
So at that time, I was still in Hong Kong, and it was right at the when Occupy Wall Street was first starting. Protesters were everywhere. I was with a group of bankers in a bar in Hong
hmm
Kong, people that and we were kind of joking about how Wall Street was being completely villainized. The joke really was, as much as they hate Wall Street and hate bankers
hmm
as elitist, classist,
hmm
um, arrogant, selfish people, they still do not have a clue about what it's really like, how corrupt it is, how deviant it is, how debaucherous it is.
You have
And
no
so
idea until you've been in it, right?
exactly. So, okay, I'm going to set up a Twitter account. And so the idea was to kind of blend humor and satire and insight and pull back the curtain on a mentality and on an industry. And so I knew, given the timing, that it would be popular, and it was popular almost, immediately. Within weeks of
Uh-huh.
setting up a fictional Twitter account, it
Mm.
was in the New York Times and
Yeah.
the Financial Times. Then it, grew until I kind of got tired of it after the book came out. I got tired of it. It grew to ultimately having
More than 1 million people following what you wrote. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a perfect point to lob you a reader question, if you will. Please, 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 please do a podcast on navigating professional life in a male dominated workplace. I have been objectified because of my gender by peers all the way to CEO level throughout my career. I grew thick skin over the years, but it still gets me sometimes. And then we had a flood of responses from many other readers saying, I'm from tech, I'm from oil trading, I'm from banking, I'm from aviation, I'm from manufacturing, and I feel the same.
Okay, so that's a very difficult question.
Yes.
And I guess I will provide some context. When
Mm-hmm.
I started in 2001, my boss referred the hiring of women as the office beautification project.
It's disgusting.
And when the hedge fund sales team hired female analysts, they called them tethered goats
Oh my God.
because they wanted to bring them out and have them impress clients with
Yeah.
their looks.
Yes.
So things have thankfully changed a lot. There is no easy answer. So I think what I would say in terms of advice is to, first of all, you have to find a balance, right? And so I'll give you an example. We had a female colleague that would basically cry sexism at every opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
if you used sports analogies,
Mm-hmm.
that was considered sexist.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point where nobody was comfortable being around this person because
Mm.
it was almost like you were walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And so they were excluded from deal teams, they were excluded from social gatherings. They were almost like a pariah because people were so afraid to offend this person. While it's important to
Mm-hmm.
stand up for yourself, you do not want to do it in a kind of a toxic way. So you kind
Yeah.
of have that on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum is, being kind of one of the guys,
Yeah.
proving yourself that
Complicit with
you
it.
are somebody, using swear words,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
going out and drinking, telling vulgar jokes,
Yeah.
showing that you're relatable.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of at the other end of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
So I think you almost have to borrow from both of those worlds,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the situation that you're in,
Yeah.
while never compromising an inch. So, don't be something other than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Never, ever apologize.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, demean yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
think, you mentioned someone being told to get coffee or
Mm-hmm.
buy birthday cakes.
Yes. Yes. That's right. Yeah.
If a boss throws you some money to
Uh-huh.
go get coffee, you don't take the money. You can go get coffee, but you say, "All right, I'll get coffee, but I'm going to pay for it,"
Mm.
because you need to have self-respect. You want to
Yeah.
get coffee, go get coffee. You don't want to get coffee, don't get coffee. But
It's upsetting the
you
power
have to be
dynamic.
in charge. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you refuse to take the money, they stop asking you because
Mm-hmm.
it's a matter of self-respect. It's a quiet way of almost calling them out for, without embarrassing them, for being inappropriate. The
Yeah.
same is true with, going out drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Put your card behind the bar.
Mm.
Take control of the situation. And it doesn't matter if you don't drink, or you don't
Mm-hmm.
drink 20 drinks or one drink. I think in this day and age, unlike when we were going through this, it doesn't really matter if not drinking is almost kind of the cool thing to do nowadays, especially in
Mm-hmm.
tech.
Mm-hmm.
Given how attitudes have changed.
I totally agree with you. It's that balance of empathy with boundaries. So another question I have for you, John, is because I've read some of your earlier articles about, advice for interns, and you said this iconic statement, if your boss smokes, you smoke.
Yeah,
Right? And I have a reader comment that says, I feel like all the action happens when guys go out for drinks or they go smoking or they, go for late night entertainment and that sort of stuff. They bond and they get closer to the boss by doing what the boss likes. And I don't like
exactly.
doing that. Any advice for me?
Perfect. Okay. Now,
Yes.
I wrote that as a joke
Yes.
10 years ago, because I saw that it worked. The Asia head of capital markets at Citigroup was a big smoker, and the head of fixed income was a smoker.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that smoked with him got an extra 30 minutes or an hour per day of one-on-one time with
Yep.
the boss and the boss's boss. And when a cigarette is in your hand or a drink is in your hand,
Mm.
it changes the dynamic of
Yes.
what you talk to people about, how you relate.
Mm.
It's like a common bond. There was a study of over, I think, 2,000 people at various financial institutions, and they confirmed statistically that if you smoked with your boss, you got paid more and you got promoted more quickly.
Mm.
So, it was kind of proven out. And that's just a kind of a fun analogy.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, you can translate that to anything and everything that you do, whether it's, playing golf or drinking or whatever it is that your boss likes to do. It's really just about relating to them on their
Yes.
level in a environment that they're comfortable in, and that is a way to get an edge.
So what you're saying is that it's not literally if your boss smokes, go and smoke, but it's really the principle is you've got to find a way of getting that connection and getting that one-on-one time. And I think you're spot on. Like, so as a woman, some ways I did this is that I like to eat. I like to check out new restaurants, and many of my bosses were foodies. And I would say, hey, there's this great restaurant that just opened. Let's go out for lunch. And we could do it over lunch, and I could get really curious. Tell me about the kids, what's going on. And because I'm a woman, I could offer a female perspective. Many times they were going through problems with their marriage or their wife, and they would open up and they would share with me all kinds of stuff. And I would say, well, look, as a woman, here's how I would read the situation. Here's some advice, or if they wanted it, or sometimes just empathize with them and be a great listening ear.
Exactly right. It's not literally about smoking.
Mhm.
It's just about finding a way to connect with them on their levels. What do people what are people looking for? They
Yes.
want somebody they want somebody that they can sit next to on an airplane.
Yes.
They want somebody that they can sit at a hotel bar with for
Hmm.
3 hours on a business trip. They
Yes.
want to know that you're interesting.
Mhm.
So I think those are actually more important than kind of demonstrating how good you are at Excel, or as of equal importance when
For sure.
compared to Excel and PowerPoint. Because as I
For
said,
sure.
the job's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, research has demonstrated that so much of promotion is actually likability. Like you said, the airplane test is like, would I want to be stuck next to this person on an airplane, right? So,
Yeah, of course, and those skills, those kind of soft skills, and I think you wrote about that in your book,
yes.
the importance of soft skills in, a changing environment. And now, of course, now we've entered the age of AI.
Mm.
In a chat GPT world, those lessons and those skill sets are even more important.
Another question is, how do I actually do all this bonding if I have never seen my boss, or if I work in a remote, situation, or if I'm like, working with all these people from other countries and there are no opportunities to socialize face to face?
I mean, you can only do what's possible.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that stuck out to me when you said that is
Mhm.
when you're working remotely.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine.
Ah,
If you can, go to the office,
yes.
no matter what.
Hmm.
When it comes to bonding, understanding the
Hmm.
culture, efficiency, spontaneous idea generation,
Hmm.
opportunities, um, go to the office. Remote work is terrible advice for
Hmm.
somebody who cares about their career and is
Hmm.
still establishing themselves. If you're in your mid 30s or 40s or older and you have clients and a career, and
Hmm.
that's fine. But if you're starting out or you building a career, you have to go into the office. And I think
Hmm.
those opportunities will materialize just by virtue of being there. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times
Yep.
where somebody said to me,
Hmm.
"Hey, grab a tie and
Hmm.
let's go to a meeting," or
Yep.
"Hey, my wife just canceled dinner. Let's go grab drinks."
Yes.
Those opportunities can't happen if you're, trying to do everything on Zoom. And so I detest the idea
Hmm.
of young people who want to work, who want more flexible hours and work from home, because I think it's terrible, terrible advice.
I think one of the advantages you and I had when we started investment banking exactly the same year is that there was this culture of side by side mentorship. I would be as a junior analyst doing the Excel DCF right next to my senior who was just 1 year, 2 years older than me. And because they weren't so senior, I felt like I wasn't intimidated to ask any question and they had a lot of time to mentor me. And it was true that kind of side by side contact that you bond and you actually learn so many things, not just the spoken, but the unspoken nuances. And I feel like in these days of cost cutting, we're actually losing a lot of that middle layer. So we have a lot of MDs, we have a lot of newcomers, but there's not a lot of associates, etc., to really mentor and show the younger generation the way as well. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more. Said another way, if you're sitting next to your boss
Mm-hmm.
or any senior person who is, doing well, is well regarded, is successful, is on a track that you want to emulate,
Mm-hmm.
what better place is there to be than sitting right next to them?
Yep.
Watching what they read,
Mm-hmm.
watching who they talk to on the phone, how
Yes.
they interact with their superiors, how they spend their time, how they talk to clients,
Mm-hmm.
listening in on their phone conversations. I mean, that is certainly for me one of the big benefits of and one of the allures of being on a trading floor, because it was almost like being in the trenches, and you
Yeah.
had all the benefits that go with that
Mm-hmm.
from a professional perspective. But from a personal perspective, it was bonding you together. You had camaraderie,
Mm-hmm.
the late nights,
Yes.
the spontaneous strength. That was a common bond that you shared.
I work on the trading floor as well. What I really miss is the noise. And it's like you hear the conversations all around you, 360 conversations. And I remember like when there was some client that was being difficult, sometimes the salesperson would put it on speakerphone and they would go at it with the client and then everyone would gather around to eavesdrop or listen or whatever or cheer that person on and then we would kind of like dissect what happened play by play. Oh man, I loved it when you said this part. That was good. I'm going to use that. In a way, there was so much of this kind of live front row seats to where the action was. And I don't know if I would have been as successful at persuasion, influence, and all of that if I hadn't had front row tickets to where the action was.
Right. And it's not just that. I think
Mhm.
that probably emboldened you from a personality perspective, right? You
Yes.
you absorb all of that, and it
Yes.
teaches you as a woman how
Hmm.
to stand up for yourself, how
Hmm.
to have self-respect, how to tell people, to back off in, obviously less polite terms. It kind of it was part of the foundation of your professional personality. And
Yes.
those skills would not have evolved
Mm.
if you hadn't been in that environment. And certainly they wouldn't have evolved if you had been, doing a Zoom call in your pajamas at, 10 o'clock in the morning.
I want to touch on this point about pajamas, and you mentioned grab a tie as well, okay? Because they both relate to something I think you and I really relate on, which is the importance of fashion and style, which is not to me a frivolous thing. Now, there were many times where the boss would go, for lunch somewhere to meet an important client. And I'm sure, part of it is, being a not unattractive looking female, but part of it is that I knew how to dress well. And the boss would say, "Oh, we're going to meet XYZ client." You would look around the office. You'd be like, "Oh, Crystal, you're wearing a really nice suit today. Come with me to
Yep.
meet this client, right? You look you look presentable. So like I think you write a lot also about the importance of dressing well. And I think it's actually a crying shame when I go today to the Central Business District, the CBD in Singapore, I see people in athleisure. I see like people going to the office in crop tops and like all kinds of like outfits to me, which I don't know. I don't know if I'm a dinosaur or something, but to me it's like I just feel that when I put something on that makes me feel powerful, it does wonders for my psyche.
It's unbelievable, right? So
Mhm,
if you dress professionally, as you said, I think you get more opportunities. In my experience, you get more opportunities. I
mhm.
think people are more respectful towards you if
Yes.
you kind of dress the part. And uh, even a kind of a corollary benefit is from a perception. If
Mhm.
you're walking around the office dressed up, people will just assume that you have a client meeting or you're doing something important. So the perception of success and importance is attributed to that person. And I think there are a lot of benefits that come from that perception.
Yeah. And we're not saying that the quality of your work doesn't count. It does. You still have to deliver great work, but it is also about not neglecting that half of it is the work, half of it is the perception of that work and of who you are.
Right. It goes without saying, right? The
Mhm.
the quality of the work is a given. Of course you can do the job. Now
Yeah.
let's focus on everything else where you can, try and get an advantage over your peers.
So I want to shift over to the next question, which is how do you think that finding a mentor or having a sponsor at work, somebody who will fight for you, is necessary? And if so, like how would you recommend that one finds an internal sponsor?
Okay, I would give different advice depending on if I was talking to a man or a woman.
Yes. Okay.
First of all, I think having a mentor is very important. It's
Mhm.
a must-have, and so I think everyone needs uh, what I call it's not my term for it, but the banking term for it, a rabbi,
Rabbi.
which is a rabbi is in banking. That was the early term for a mentor was a rabbi, and I think the distinction is the difference. Perhaps a mentor is someone that you go to for
Mhm.
advice
Mm.
and to kind of look out for you. A rabbi is somebody who you identify
Yes.
as a rising star, somebody more senior than you that is
Uh-huh.
well respected, that
Mhm.
is on a career trajectory that you would like to emulate,
Mhm.
and you try and hitch your kind of wagon to that star
Mhm.
and ride along with it. So
Mhm.
you can learn from them, you can emulate them, you can try and work with them and develop almost like a big brother or big sister relationship with, or
Mhm.
a rabbi relationship with them. So I think it's more than a mentor because you're
Yes.
you're trying to almost kind of glide along with them.
Right.
So I think everyone needs that type of
Mhm.
mentor.
Mhm.
Now, for women, I think, and perhaps I'm not best positioned to speak to this, but I would say that every female in most of these industries that you address they're male dominated industries.
Mhm.
And so a young female professional needs a senior female mentor
Mhm.
to help her, to look out for her, to help her deal with situations where they've got a difficult boss or they're encountering obstacles, whether
Mhm.
it's sexism or jealousy or kind of female specific issues, having kids or work life balance, all of
Yes.
these things that only a woman can understand. And so
Yes.
that mentor should be a very senior woman who is who has reached the pinnacle of
Mhm.
what she's wanted to accomplish professionally, who isn't going to be punching down or isn't going to be envious or jealous or feel threatened.
Yeah, I think it's almost like having a whole board of mentors in a way. Every one of them serves a different function. Like you said, everyone needs a rabbi and everyone needs a wise woman in their life. And they're like, it's like the Avengers. You have like different mentors. Sometimes mentors can be younger than you that give you a different perspective on things that, that maybe you just didn't have access to that subculture to see, for example. So I've got two more questions. I've got one specifically about Carla Harris. And Carla Harris is quite popular on social media. She was an investment banker from Morgan Stanley. She had a TED Talk that went viral, and she talked about the need to appear tough on Wall Street. And then I had some followers who wrote to me and said, I'm really interested in hearing, do you think this walking tough, talking tough approach for a woman really works in Asia? What do you think?
I think being tough is essential.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had a young female banker who
Mm-hmm.
walked over onto the trading floor from the investment banking side, who was attractive, and one of the traders in front of everybody referenced her boss and said, "Hey," with obviously a very nasty insinuation, said,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, um, what does your boss's apartment look like?"
Oh my God.
And to embarrass and shame her, as if to imply that she was, of
Yes.
course, in a relationship with her boss. Otherwise,
Yes.
she wouldn't be in the job that she was in.
Yeah.
And she looked straight at him and said, "I don't know. The lights were off." And then everyone just started laughing and then she just turned around and walked away. And that nobody ever messed with her again. So
Right.
it showed A, that she was tough, and B, that she had a sense of humor, and
Yes.
C, that she was not going to take anything from anybody, and she was not intimidated or
Yes.
afraid. And also, more importantly, it showed that she had a sense of humor. She said, "Okay, that was her way of saying that was inappropriate,
Yes.
but I'm not going to call HR.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna let it go." And then she was, a popular figure and fixture on the trading floor for
Mm-hmm.
that. So I think and again, you know, there's no such thing as universal advice.
Yes.
Everybody faces different work environments and different situations. But from my experience, being tough, especially in male dominated kind of locker room culture type environments,
Right.
being tough and not showing weakness is absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm.
All the women that I saw be successful in banking, I think would be described and would describe themselves as tough
I think that
and thick
you're
skinned. Absolutely.
thick skin. Yeah, thick skin is something I speak about quite a lot. And I think you're absolutely spot on the need for thick skin to be tough and have resilience.
If you think about an adversarial relationship between a man
Mm-hmm.
and another man, or a man and a woman. So in a work environment, if two men are in an adversarial situation or almost a power struggle,
Yep.
they try and pick at the other person, right?
Yes.
And so the same thing applies to a woman. And
Yes.
so if someone pushes her buttons,
Uh-huh.
what they're trying to do is see, is she going to be emotional? All
Yeah.
the kind of stereotypical
Yes. Is she
cliches,
gonna
right?
be
Is,
hysterical?
is she going to cry? Is she going
Yeah.
to be irrational? Is she
Mm.
going to be emotional? And if she is any of those things, she
Mm.
loses.
Mm. Mm.
So she has to be thick-skinned, has to be tough, and
Mm-hmm.
has to be stoic, and
Mm-hmm.
not let anything get to her. And that might not be fair, but that is
Mm.
certainly the reality of what it takes to be successful in a kind of locker room corporate culture that
Yeah.
is male dominated.
I often talk about being thick skinned and just like having this attitude that why not?
Because it's been established that you're going to take it, then you become the doormat, right?
Mm.
You get sent on the coffee runs.
Mm.
Is about being assertive and not taking any shit from anybody.
Absolutely. One of my mantras was like, never let them see you sweat. You just like big smile on your face, fuck you with a big smile, positive energy, fuck you. It's kind of like
Exactly.
having those boundaries. And how do I put this? I always think that if you have a personality in a landscape of people in the corporate world who are mostly devoid of personality, if you have a personality and if you're passionate and if you do good work, people will forgive you almost anything because you're fun, you're interesting, you're likable, right? And of course, in today's woke culture, it's a little bit trickier with humor. It's a little bit difficult with personality, but I think we still have to try to like assert ourselves and be authentic and speak from a place of heart. And I think if we get it wrong, if we make mistakes, if we, inadvertently offend somebody, which I'm sure will happen, it's also about having the maturity to say, hey, that thing I said, I apologize.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it doesn't matter which direction woke culture goes in. I mean, that's
Mhm.
kind of that is so fundamental that I think it'll never change.
And one other thing that I would add to what you said is that I think an apology is an underrated superpower. Very, very few people I found in the professional world understand the gift of an apology. So something happens that maybe has ruptured the trust between you and a client, or you've done something to piss someone off. Actually, I found that most of my best relationships in banking were when those mistakes were made. And I remember, for example, like making a huge mistake with a client, fund manager, and I totally screwed up their order. And I got on the phone and I had a heart to heart and I laid it out and I really apologized to that person. And because it was so authentic, like we had that connection, and that person, felt so bad that they kept on giving me
Yeah.
more and more orders after that, because like I bothered to, really, I wouldn't say man up, but woman up, and say, this is it. I'm big enough to like call out my own shit.
What you're actually saying is that is what makes you tough because
Yes.
you're kind of attracting empathy, you're demonstrating confidence, you're demonstrating trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so while that doesn't sound like it's a tough thing to do, as we all know, it actually is a sign of being strong and tough and confident. And I think that people respond to that.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a lot of courage to apologize and to do it well, and to do it in a way that inspires confidence. So you're not just like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. It's not like that at all. It's like looking someone in the eye and say, I had a look at what happened. My bad. On my side, I take full responsibility for this error. Here's what I'm going to do about it to make sure it never happens again. Let me buy you lunch, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and think about, I mean, people don't do it often enough, but think about how commonsensical that is in terms of the message that it sends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're being accountable, you're
Mm-hmm.
demonstrating remorse,
Mm-hmm.
you're demonstrating a comprehension
Mm-hmm.
such that it's probably not going to happen again.
Yeah.
So people are more likely to trust you. They're more
Yes.
likely to respect you.
Yes.
It's just it boggles my mind that more people don't think to stick their hand up when they made a mistake or apologize when they did something wrong because generally speaking, it wins every single time in the long run.
I have one last question for you, John. This is like super important. Every weekend, I get asked about horrible bosses. I have an unsupportive boss. I have a boss who tries to undermine me or is threatened by me, and is for whatever reason taking credit for my work, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. But I'm just wondering if you ever had real life experiences dealing with people above you who seemed like they were out to get you, who were unsupportive, and what did you do with that?
Yes, I have had that happen, of course. You know, and we could probably talk an hour on that very subject because it's there's so much nuance to it, and it
Mm,
depends so much on where somebody is in their career and
yes.
what opportunity they have to and how much control they have over their own situation. So I remember my first boss. didn't seem to like me, and vice versa. And
Mm,
actually, and he rode motorcycles on the weekends with another analyst. He was the
mm-hmm.
managing director, but with another analyst in the team. They were
Wow.
similar to, smoking with your boss. This
Mm-hmm.
guy took it to another level. They went
Mm,
on motorcycle rides. And so all of the business, all the deals got thrown at this kid and
mm,
away from me. And so,
mm,
you know, there was one situation where I identified a possible transaction, $500 million transaction. So not small, but the market had mispriced a specific credit. And so I pitched the deal, and I was a first year analyst. Obviously, not, it would be quite an accomplishment for a first year analyst to do something like this. And they loved the idea. And then they turned around, and when it came time to executing the deal, I wasn't even on the deal team.
oh my God.
And so I think I had enough self-respect and pride that I kind of stuck my hand up and I said, listen, I'm done. I'm not working. It's either him or me. You put me somewhere else. And I had demonstrated to enough other people
Mm-hmm.
within the organization that I was worthy of protecting. And so, they kind of bent. And if I hadn't said anything, I would have been
Yeah.
stifled. I would have been miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Things would have never changed.
Mm,
But I stuck my hand up with pride and
mm-hmm.
self-respect and said, look, this is it. Fix it or I'm out of here. It's really about having self-respect. If there's nothing you can do about it, don't waste a second of your time. Improve your
Mm-hmm.
situation for yourself. Take action immediately. So that's kind of one experience I had. I think the other example or kind of aspect of your question related to perhaps somebody being jealous
Mm-hmm.
or taking credit for your work. Um, this is where the nuance comes into play because it's very complicated. I think there are situations where sometimes you just have to be patient.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're young, it's not a sprint, it's a
Mm,
marathon. So
mm,
if there's a middle layer that is jealous and spiteful and taking credit for your accomplishments. So if you're an
mm,
analyst and they're an associate and you think that they are kind of keeping you down for their benefit or
mm.
trying to bring the spotlight, sometimes instead of picking a fight
Yep.
in the open and making your feelings known,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times that does nothing but hurt you.
Yeah.
So
Makes you look
sometimes you
petty
just
or threatened.
have to be exactly makes you look insecure.
Yeah.
And also, that's a headache that senior bosses don't want to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
It's
giving them
trivial.
a homework assignment. It's almost it's
Yes, it's
childish.
childlike.
So you just have to remember that it's not a sprint, it's a
Mm,
marathon. And
yes.
that in these types of environments, kind of the old expression,
Mm,
water seeks its own level,
yes.
eventually everything evens out over time. And so a lot of times you just have to be patient.
Mm.
Don't cause drama. Don't cut your nose to spite your face, and just wait it out.
Yeah, I'm really, really grateful that you came on this podcast, John. And thank you so much for dropping gold for this whole episode. I can't thank you enough. It's just been
Of
great to reconnect.
Of course, Crystal. It's nice to reconnect, and I am now a big fan of you on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok or LinkedIn, but I certainly enjoy your Instagram posts, and so I'm very happy to see you and all the great things you're doing. It's a blast to watch, and so I look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks so much, John. And thanks for constantly sending me advice about like how I could improve what I'm doing. And I find that just so refreshing. And you've got such a big heart. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening to Comfort and Growth, the podcast for people who are passionate about personal growth and productivity. It's been a joy to have John. And John LeFevre, where can we find you on the internet?
I guess I'm most active on Twitter. I mean, obviously, I have a
Mm-hmm.
presence everywhere, but just first name, last name, John LeFevre at Twitter is where I spend most of my time nowadays.
Great. We'll link to all of your resources and your socials down below at the show notes. Thanks so much and see you again next week. If you love this show, like it, rate it, wherever you're listening. And thank you for listening. See you. Bye.